I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Welcome to Campfire Talk, everyone. This is where we sit around the campfire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. Milo says he's going to behave today, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
And he never does.
I get weird phone calls in the middle of the night. So, hey, what do you want from me?
There you go. There you
Hey,
go.
I got a question. When you say we put our feet up around the campfire,
Yeah.
how close are we to this thing?
Well, you know, close enough so we don't get our backsides burned.
Backside, I'm worried about my feet.
It's all on you, buddy. It's all on you.
Just
It's
don't throw
on
any
me.
gunpowder in it.
Sit as close as you
Gunpowder.
like. That's right.
Oh, there's
Oh, yeah.
the joke. There we go. She started it now.
Oh.
Is there an inside joke there?
You know, I was ignorant. I grew up in Long Beach, California. I didn't know what all that crap was. And all of a sudden, everybody else is like, oh, crap. You know,
David, you know that story, don't you?
Yeah.
yeah, y'all can piss off.
Careful with language. We have kids that listen now.
I didn't say anything bad. I said kiss off.
Well, it wasn't your fault, Milo. I mean,
Oh, I know it wasn't my fault, but still, it's like playing.
you were
God.
victimized.
Uh,
Well, Will,
yes.
Milo, I got a question about that area. I know there's been probably a lot of development in Washington State, housing
Yeah.
and stuff. But have either one of you driven by there, and do you think that still would be an area that's kind of
Oh, yeah.
got some
Well,
activity? Or
Yeah. You know,
Now,
before I moved to California, I was working that area just north of Mount St. Helens, and I was getting a lot of information from people that there was stuff going on there, but I had just begun working it, so I didn't really, get to develop it much.
Well, why did you move to California? I'm curious.
girlfriend.
Uh-oh.
Oh, crap.
Uh-oh.
What? What?
Milo, you're
Will
not in trouble,
got kind
Milo.
of quiet then, guys.
No, I'm just waiting for you guys to be done.
To quit beating you up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. That's funny coming from somebody who just said, well, look at who had a campfire experience in Ape Canyon. Yeah. Gunpowder. Guess who? The moron. Milo. Yeah, I gotcha.
Oh no.
Oh, God.
But I am curious. So if
Oh,
there's
here
still
we
having
go.
activity
Thanks
in that
a lot.
area,
Curious of what?
well, that area, there's got to be some of the local residents. I know you don't. I don't know if you know anybody there, but I'd just be curious to see if people are still having activity and if they're
Yeah.
Well, that area.
what's going on.
Okay. Well, to be honest, I haven't been back there since Mount St. Helens blew up.
Yeah, I've driven around
So-
that area. I mean, when I lived in Vancouver, I spent time going out kind of towards that area, but kind of stayed on the south side and over by Mount Adams. But from everything that people told me, witnesses, that there was plenty of activity going on up north there. And
Well, how close was that to Mount St. Helens?
It was right there.
yeah, there's
Oh,
a
it was right
shelf. There's a shelf on the eastern side that's called the Plains of Abraham, and then it drops off that shelf down into an area that's called the Dark Divide. So Ape Canyon is along that edge of that shelf, And at the head of Ape Canyon is where the miners had their cabin. You know, the ones that were attacked in 1924.
From above.
Yeah, they were up on that shelf there, on top there.
Now that's kind of around the Cougar area of Washington,
Yes.
isn't it? Or,
Yeah, it's Cougar's a ways away from there, but yeah, it's on that side. Or I should say you can approach it from that side. We came in from the north. We came in from the side where Spirit Lake is, and there used to be a ranger station, and past the ranger station you drive up and the road ended. And there was like a turnaround there and some, you know, porta potties and stuff like that. Then there was the trailhead.
Ooh, you said porta potty.
Porta potty, and the trailhead went up to Windy Pass, and that was at the top of this shelf. Right when you went through Windy Pass, that was the Plains of Abraham.
and that's on the east side.
Oh, we get some crinkling. What's that crinkling?
Forest.
Not me.
Yeah, sure.
Not me. I'm not.
Okay, here's what I got. Okay, Ape Canyon is a gorge along the edge of the Plains of Abraham on the southeast shoulder of Mount St. Helens in the state of Washington. The gorge narrows to as close as 8 feet at one point. The name alludes to a report encounter with the several ape men in 1924 against the miners. There you go, folklore.
No, that was Fred Beck and the rest of his group in 1924. They approached that area along the Lewis River, you know, coming from out of Vancouver. And according to Beck, you know, they had found tracks periodically along Lewis River coming up that direction. So Ape Canyon, that area is where they had their mine, their gold mine.
Did they ever find the mine after all that?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Because that'd be curious. I mean,
I don't even know if it produced or not.
well, I mean, how far, you know, I'm just curious to see how far it would go back, and God, it'd be nasty now after the eruption, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, if it still exists, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, it would be an interesting kind of weird venture, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just
looking at
Ape
Google
Canyon's
Earth
still
here.
there, isn't it?
What's that Forrest?
I said Ape Canyon is still there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's there. In fact,
Because I think I remember seeing a sign. I drove up there around what's that little town?
Oh, they had cars way back then?
Yeah, they were. We had cars back then. You know, my little Model T. I was putting around up there. I'm gonna get you, Milo.
you know, Milo, I think she mentioned one time something about flying up there and beating you.
I could catch me first.
I could be wrong, but you know, it was kind of in the back of my mind somewhere.
Back in the horse and buggy days.
I knew it. See, I knew it.
That area is quite a bit different now, you know, of course, after the mountain blew, but it didn't devastate that area, that particular area, as bad as it did on the north side, because that's due east.
Well, the Toutle River side is the part that got really sucked.
Yeah, on the other side of the mountain there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know.
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
Well, yeah, quick question. So just to the east, in the Dark Divide, is that also the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, or is that something else?
No, that's Gifford-Pinchot. Yeah, the Gifford-Pinchot covers a huge area.
Right, and a lot of it is that volcanic stuff with moss growing on it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hey, Cuz.
Yeah.
Well, what was that guy's name that started all those stories and rumors about the bodies being found when it blew?
Oh, you know, I don't know who the person was that initially started it, but I do know there was a guy who used to have a used bookstore in Portland. His name was Ray Crow. and Crow was going to join my group for a while. He was going to make our newsletter for us, and he went with my field crew and I one time up to an area. Let me think, it was just southeast of the town of Cougar, on the eastern side of the reservoirs up there. And he brought his camper, his cab, the camper that sits on the back of a pickup. And he wouldn't go out into the brush. He said he didn't go very far from his camper, and he didn't go into the woods. And so I had the field team out. We were working a new area and kind of just looking it over to see, where we wanted to start researching that area. And Crow and I were walking along, and he did a couple things on that particular trip that were interesting. The first one was, he says, well, I think that when the mountain blew, that it probably killed a bunch of Bigfoot up here. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, there was no information. I said, I was in the Army, and my unit was one of them that did a lot of the rescue work around Mount St. Helens when it blew. And
between yours and ours, because it was mostly all the light units and stuff that went.
Well, ours was because of all the helicopters, but
right.
So I said, and the pilots certainly would have told me of anything that was going on, and they said there was no word of anything. So I didn't think much of his idea. And then the other one was, we heard a woodpecker, and I actually saw the woodpecker after a few moments of listening to it, and he stopped. He almost went into shock. He says, wait, what's that? What's that? I said, it's a woodpecker. I mean, it was obviously a woodpecker. And he says, well, he says, if I were a Bigfoot, I'd take a stick and I'd communicate by hitting on trees. And I said, Ray, it's a woodpecker. Look, right over there. About 30 yards from us, there was a woodpecker. You can see it was beating on the tree there. No, I think, I just thought, this guy is Looney Tunes.
Well, here's a question for you, Will. How would you compare the sound of the woodpecker to what we heard at 2:30 in the morning?
Oh, there's no comparison. No comparison.
It was like a bomb going off.
Well, and even Milo, when you were with Brandy, remember by Fort Lewis, the sound that she recorded, that was like a gunshot. It was no. And
it was repetitive too.
It was no tap
really
on the tree.
Wicked.
Yeah, that was crazy. It's not tap that kind of stuff. It was crack. It was crazy.
Well, how about that video that I sent you, Will, of the gorilla?
Oh yeah. Oh, I keep forgetting. I was going to send you the recording that I have of that too.
Yeah.
I got to try. Let me make a note of that.
Well, Will gets all the photos and stuff.
I'm going to tell you something, guys, that Milo, I'm going to jump in here. I want to tell you something. I remember telling Tom this a few months back, and I never said anything to you, Will. But, you're talking about not finding any Bigfoot bodies up there around Mount St. Helens. Okay. I had to go get some paperwork one time fixed by when you go up into Alaska and into Canada, you have to have what they call international health certificates for your horses, which means they have to be signed off by a federal vet. Well, there in Oregon and in Washington are several federal vets located, and so I went into the office there at what is the capital city in Washington? I just went completely blank.
The what? Olympia?
The capital, Olympia. Yes. Yeah, because I was sitting in Olympia.
City.
I was in Olympia actually the year that they got hit by the earthquake, and I was a half a mile from the epicenter, and that was a ride and a half. Anyway, I had to go get these papers signed off, and I was sitting in this guy's office, and waiting on him. And I was looking around the office, and he had all these pictures of Mount St. Helens. He had the time-lapsed pictures of the the actual eruption, and then he had aftermath scenes, and they were all over his office on his walls, And I'm sitting there, and like a dumb cluck, I just asked him, I said, did y'all ever find any Bigfoot up there? And I can remember to this day exactly his response. He put his pen down on the piece of paper. He leaned back in his chair and then looked at me, and this grin just spread across his face, and he went, yep. That's all I got out of him. Was, yep. And he had evidently been called up there to work the scene because they were counting the number of animals, I guess, that had perished in that. And they were actually counting the numbers of cougars and deer and elk that they could find, bear, anything that they could find up there that had perished. And I guess they actually had to pick those up for, I don't know, health reasons. I don't know why. I mean, why you couldn't have just left them where they lay. But anyway, they were actually counting these animals. And that's all I ever got out of him was, yep.
Yeah, I don't know where they were counting, because our pilots had come back and they were talking to me about, the people they found and where they were exposed to the blast or the pyroclastic flow. And I remember one of them was real graphic. It was a friend who was a Cobra pilot, CW3. He told me, he said, we saw this pickup and we stopped to see if anybody was around us. So we got out and walked around the side of the bed of the pickup, and the pyroclastic flow had hit that truck, and where the guy was standing on the other side of it, from where his body came above the edge of the bed of the truck, had been vaporized off. The bottom part of his body was still standing and leaning against the truck. So either things were vaporized or they were under 100 feet of ash. In most cases.
Well, I remember seeing pictures on the wall there, and you could actually, I actually saw animals that were in the ash. And, there were some animals that actually made it out alive out of that. There was some, I guess, some hunters up there that their horses, they literally, I don't know where they were in the location, so don't even, I don't want to even start saying, obviously they weren't in the direct, wave of the pyroclastic flow, but that their horses actually took them out. They rode their horses out. They just literally dropped their reins, and the horses made their way out of the area and brought them out alive. But that they had remarked about seeing dead animals everywhere, and I'm assuming that they suffocated or died in the heat, But I know these guys, they had burns. The horses had burns and all that sort of stuff, but they did come out alive. So it's, I don't know if that stuff, it's kind of like it picks and chooses its victims. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. All I can relate is what, I saw in the air. And Milo, you too. Milo and I were both stationed at Fort Lewis at that time.
Yeah. So, for one of it was just hard for, any of us. If you didn't have a helicopter or anything like that, you couldn't get around. There was a couple times I got dropped off, and it took them like 4 hours to dig me out of the friggin' mud. Because
it was ugly.
Everyone drop you off right here. Yeah, I got stuck there for like 4 hours because it took a lot for them to come and get me.
Oh, yeah, it was ugly.
Were they trying to get rid of you, Milo?
Yeah, they were trying to get rid of me. Everybody's trying to get, like you're trying to get rid of me all the time.
I'm not trying to get rid of you.
Yes, you do.
Milo.
Yeah, sure. It's like, hey, let's make fun of Milo and the gunpowder crap.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very
I
delicate.
was obviously not there. I'm just telling you what the man said, and I just was like, that look on his face when he told me that was like, oh, you know. And man, I can even remember when I related the story to my husband. He was like, "Well, why in the heck didn't you ask him more? You're always asking me questions and this and that and the other. It's always who, what, when, where, why. Why didn't you, ask him?" And I said, you know what? I don't know. I think I was just dumbfounded that he actually said yes to me.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, for everything that, for Will and it was, man, just to see that much destruction, it was, all the trees were like blown off like toothpicks everywhere. It was crazy. Yeah.
I went up there. I went up there 5 years after it blew, and you're absolutely correct. It is like there's sections where almost as far as the eye could see, it was trees that were old growth Doug fir blown over like toothpicks. It's like absolutely the most incredible sight.
You know, it was amazing too how fast that area rebounded.
Yeah, they thought it was going to take years and years.
And it did. Right. It did, and it came back really quick.
Took months and months.
Well, isn't it one of the other foresters that we had on here is that I totally agree with that. Is, you look at, it does nature really good. I mean, the forest and the area around there, between that and forest fires, that's the two natural things ever. The only thing unnatural is humans going around trying to put out all the fires. Other than the fact that, it's beneficial for what we put out there, homes and stuff, but it revives growth and stuff.
It was kind of surreal too, finding the old road network, that was inside of what was the red zone, because they blocked all that off, and we had access. They never really opened those roads up. They just kind of built new roads, and the brush grew up around the entrances to a lot of them old systems. I went and found one of them one time and drove my Blazer. My buddy Carlo, Tom, remember I was talking about Carlo. He was a friend of Linda Moulton Howe's. He used to do cattle mutilations, and he'd had a couple of Bigfoot sightings, so that's how we got connected. But he used to tag along with me a lot of times when I go to the field, and I bought this old Blazer after I did the Knott's Berry Farm project in '88, and it was a beast. I mean, I did so much to that old thing, but you could drive it right through the brush like a tank, and that's how we got into the old networks. I had him kind of guide me through the trees, and I drove through this brush to get into the old networks, and that's where we found that, I was telling you about the lily pads. And speaking of that, Tom, I had a chance recently. I really never even grabbed, lily pad stems or anything before to see what they were like. Never had any interest in it other than that time we found the ones that were pinched off the leaves. But I had recently had a chance to be close to some of those, and I tried. They're extremely fibrous, and a human couldn't pinch them off. It's just not possible with your fingers.
Oh, interesting.
They're tough.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said the other day, I was watching a totally unrelated video, and this gal was at about 5,300 foot elevation, and there was lily pad. So I don't know if you remember, a year and a half ago, we had a discussion about, is there a maximum elevation? Can these things not grow above like 2,500 foot elevation?
Oh, yeah.
That answers that question. Yeah.
They found them pretty high, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
You guys, if you don't know what we're talking about, David or Milo, there was, when I mentioned the old road networks south of Mount St. Helens, I wanted to get back into some of those and kind of research some of that area. So there used to be an old man in Vancouver, Mr. Arnold. He that was his whole life, his business. He made maps. And so I stopped in. I used to buy maps from him. So I stopped in there and I said, Mr. Arnold, do you have any maps that predate 1980 of this area before St. Helens blew? And he got a big grin on his face and he said, sure, come on over here, let me show you. And he pulled these maps out, and they were great. So I bought maps from him of that area, from pre-1980. And that's how we found our way back into those road networks. And, on the current maps, the roads didn't exist, when they had updated them. But comparing the old ones with the new ones, I was able to figure out how to get into those. And we found a small lake back in there. And like I said, it was kind of surreal because nobody had driven those roads for years, so they were in pretty bad state of repair. But, the Blazer was four-wheel drive and set up pretty high, so we got in there pretty good. So we found a small lake, and it was maybe, I don't know, an acre or two in size, and about 4 or 5 feet deep tops. And it was covered in lily pads. And, I'm looking around to see if there's any kind of tracks, animal tracks, what was in there. And what I started seeing was all these lily pad leaves floating upside down on the water with no stem. And at the base of the leaf, you could see where they'd been pinched off. And I'm thinking, wow, what did that? Nobody's been in here for years. So we went around to, there was a dock at the edge of this small lake, and it was pretty rickety, but we were able to get out on it. And like I said, the water wasn't very deep, so you could look down the bottom and see the tubers, for the lily pads where the stems grow up out of, and the leaf is up on the surface. So at one point on one of these tubers, you could see this big bite mark out of it. And it was probably, 6-8 inches across. Well, you could see there'd be these big blocky teeth had bitten through this thing. And I'm telling Carlo, look at this, and we ended up finding a raft there that actually worked. So we used it to go out on the water, and we were looking at these lily pad stems, or the leaves. Well, the stems were gone. They were nowhere to be found. So something had harvested the stems, pinched off the leaves, and leaves were floating on the water upside down. Dozens of them. And I just thought it odd, But just recently, like I said, I had a chance to, try to pinch lily pad stems, and man, those things, they're tough as nails.
Here's the question, Will. If it's pinching off the leaves, obviously it's not interested in eating the leaves. What's it doing? What's it interested in? Does it want the tubers?
I went to the library in Vancouver after that because I was curious myself. I thought, well, what good are lily pad stems? And come to find out, the natives in the area, when they were fighting the military, U.S. military, in some of the last days, like there's a town called Battleground, and it was named so after one of the last Indian wars. And so what the Indians would do, they were smart, smarter than the U.S. military, because they would always know when they were coming and going to, do some campaign. So they would stock up ahead of time. And of course, the military thought they could wait them out because they thought they weren't smart enough to put up water and food. Well, the natives did. So and lily pad stems were one of the things that hold a lot of water. So that was one of the uses they did for them. So maybe these
they're like a natural canteen.
Yeah, kind of. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe these things were, taking lily pad stems and stockpiling them somewhere so they didn't have to travel for water. Who knows? They're pretty fibrous, so I don't know if they're edible, but, something like that might eat things we would never be able to eat.
Well, it could be, and they might, if it's fibrous, maybe they use it for, if they need to clean themselves out.
A laxative, sure.
Get things moving.
The green rotor-rooter.
That's right. And now we know why there's screams in the forest at night.
That's right. Now we know the source of those screams.
Hence the word pinched off.
Oh, Milo made it funny.
Oh, bad play on words. There we go. Oh, man. But
hey, I got a joke. Can I do a joke?
As long as it's a clean one.
Well, it's not,
because we get kids listen to the show.
Crap.
and we don't want and then we got YouTube listens.
That's right.
YouTube advertisers, so we don't need YouTube strikes. So yeah.
Man,
but other than that
was a good joke.
Okay.
Well, you have to tell us off the air.
Okay. Yeah. There went my Oh, come on.
But no, Washington State has a lot of interesting activity going on up there. And Will, you had that one, that scream up, I think it was northeast of Quinault.
It was, yeah, that was actually, if you go up the Quinault River, and it's about 13 miles from Highway 101 along the Quinault, there's a place called Graves Creek Campground. The river divides there, and we were on the North Fork. There used to be 7 little campsites there too, and we heard that just loud scream from that ridge that divides the river there.
On the Highway 1 side, 101 side.
Yeah, if you go up the west side of the peninsula.
Yeah.
And it's you go, I'm trying to remember what little town you go through. Well, you go through Aberdeen, but you go up 101 on that side, and you go to the Quinault River. I think it's actually called the Quinault River Road. And it's just a gravel road that goes up the river to that campground.
Hey, Cuz?
Yeah.
I was just looking up the lily pads, and it says they have other medicinal purposes like diseases of the throat, mouth. It can be used for burns and boils, as well as chronic diarrhea.
Oh, there we go. There was, I don't know if it was those, there was one of those plants, I don't know if it was lily pads, I can't remember, but they talked about up until like the 1930s that people were still collecting things like that, rather, because they didn't really have pharmacies to go to per se, for painkillers and things like that.
Well, that's actually becoming a kind of a thing, sort of. It's like people are rediscovering these medicinal plants as well as edible plants that are grandparents. It was just common stuff with them. And a lot of them are these medicinal plants that are, natural painkillers and maybe antibiotics and that sort of thing.
Forrest should know all about that kind of stuff.
Why's that?
I'm not.
You asked, Milo.
I'm not a doctor.
No, just old.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, all right.
We haven't.
I think we've gone as far as we can go with that one.
Well, I am old. What can I say?
Well, and the heck, I'm 5 or 6 years younger, so not that far off. So
I was say Chuck and David are the only ones that aren't old here.
Right?
Oh,
I mean, when
I'm feeling it though.
When you could actually say stuff like, pharmacy, you go, oh, I was just trying to be really enlightened there.
No. It's a pocket.
Well, let me ask you a question here. Chuck, do y'all have what they call Comanche Novocaine down in Oklahoma? I don't know if it grows up in your part of the country.
I haven't heard of that, actually.
Well, I actually, we have bushes here, and I actually have one just, well, I have them all over my property, actually, and they can get pretty, they can get about 10, 12 feet high. And you can actually, and my vet was the one that actually, and we were walking through the pasture one afternoon, and he stopped and he said, here, he pulls off a leaf and he says, chew that. And I'm like, look at him like, Dan, you trying to do me in here or what? And he said, no, that's called Comanche Novocaine. And I did chew it, and I'm almost immediately, my whole entire mouth, I couldn't feel it.
Now here's a thought. Here's a thought. Now, who come up with that to go? I mean, to me, if you go out and grab something off a plant and stick it in your mouth and it deadens your whole mouth, wouldn't that be like all the alarm bells going off and red flags going up as something you don't want to do?
Right?
Well, maybe. I mean, but on the same token, if at some point in time you had a toothache, you might go, hey, I remember chewing on this plant and it made my mouth go numb. Maybe I ought to do that again. And maybe, I always wondered, how is it that we discovered, well, I guess it was completely trial and error when we found out whether certain foods were edible and some things weren't. And, I mean, how does an elk or a deer know to go chew on the bark of a birch tree that it reacts and treats them just like aspirin does? I mean, how do we know? How do they know to do that?
Exactly.
I mean,
Willow.
Hey, and it might be that
Willow does the same thing.
Interesting.
You know, it might be. Here's the thing. You know, they talk about natural selection. It's, you know, the dumb ones in the group are the ones that do something and then they die. Well, I don't think it's a matter that they're dumb. I don't think it's a matter they're dumb. It's, well, maybe they are, but they go and do something. But the rest of the group sees that and says, either we do or don't do that, or hey, that has a use.
Well, I remember when I was in grammar school reading a book called Green Medicine, and I don't remember who the author was, but the upside of it was that 60% of today's medicine directly comes from plants or a derivative of plants. So somehow that knowledge is out there.
Oh, absolutely.
This plant does that. Yeah.
No, people were pretty smart with that stuff.
Sure, aspirin comes from the bark of willow trees. You know,
yeah, that's what Chuck was saying.
Yeah. So,
what are those plants
too?
Yeah.
What are those plants called that are around ponds and creeks where it produces the brown looking thing on the top? What am I thinking?
Cattails?
Cattails?
Cattails have medicinal purposes too.
What do cattails
from what I understand? Now that I don't know. I just know I've heard that before, that there's medicinal purposes for cat's tail.
I know when they're green, you can eat those.
Right. I know when they're green or they're brown, you can have wars with them. You can club each other with them. How do I know this? I don't know, but
we had wars as teenagers with something else. And Milo, not the tennis ball rockets. The remember John had those. They had those they weren't ornamental cherries. They were I don't remember what kind of cherries. They were really sour though. I mean, it wasn't something you were just going to pick off the tree and eat.
Pie cherries.
But they were hard as rocks, and we'd go pick, you know, like a bucket full of them and use wrist rockets and shoot each other with them. They made pretty good welts on your arms.
It says right here, cattails can be used for toothaches and infections, or to prevent infections.
Oh, wow. Here's something I was thinking, too. You know, we talked about this once before, where sometimes you hear noises out in the woods, or somebody might say, well, they either heard rock clacking or what they thought was wood knocking. Well, here's a thought. You know, with all these different plants that have medicinal purposes, I mean, wouldn't you need to, and I'm sure ancient people did it, probably ground those plants up with using rocks? I mean, to me, it would be more probable that a source of a sound like that would be from that kind of activity rather than communication.
It makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, and there are. I mean, when you find a lot of Native American artifacts on the ground, you find like a mortar and pestle.
Grinding stones, yeah.
Yeah, grinding stones, yeah.
Yeah, I think grinding stones are pretty universal through human culture going way back.
Yes, they are.
So it just makes me wonder, you know, if people are hearing stuff like that, if that's not really what's going on, that is they're preparing something, you know, for whatever they're using.
Well, I guess we'll never know until somebody sees them doing it.
it'd be interesting to talk to people, more people that are hearing stuff like that. You know, we get tidbits here and there, but and maybe people aren't hearing it as often as, you know, one might think.
You know, that you got a point there, because we have all this evidence that Bigfoot is, you know, doing this, that, and the other, but it would be absolutely golden to get eyewitness accounts. I would love to get an eyewitness account of somebody watching him snap a tree over. And we know they do it.
It would be, yeah.
And you have that place outside of Estacada where that, I think it was a logger, he saw the 3 Bigfoot digging through the rocks, getting the rodents out of it.
Well, when they dug the hole, yeah, I should actually, since we're talking about that, that was the Glenn Thomas story. Aired that one again Thursday for the Bigfoot History Show, so people are familiar with what we're talking about. But yeah, that one. Well, what they were doing, they said they were turning the rocks over and smelling them. So they were looking for something. And then at one point, the male apparently jumped on this pile of rocks and started digging a hole. And, you know, it was a pretty big hole. I mean, the hole was still there last time I was there. And there's a picture in one of my books with me in the hole, so to illustrate how large the hole was. It seemed like an awful lot of effort for just a handful of small rodents that he pulled out of there. So I kind of wonder if there wasn't something else going on, but just it was peculiar behavior that they were turning the rocks over and then smelling them, putting the rocks up close to their faces, almost like they were looking for something.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's the one thing we would like to get more of, is actually observed behavior, any kind of behavior, these creatures.
So they were just smelling them. They weren't like licking them or anything.
No, just smelling them. Apparently, it was very cold that morning, very frosty, and they would walk along, and then he'd pick a rock up and put it up close to their faces and smell it and put it back down and continue on. That had another component that was interesting too. I think it was a male and a female and then a young juvenile, and the female kept her body between the juvenile and the male at all times. So it's fairly easy to assume that male was not the parent of the juvenile.
Well, of course, you've talked about that before.
Yeah. They, you'll see that activity with apes and monkeys. That if very oftentimes the males they'll. Of course, the chimpanzees don't necessarily have to have a reason to kill anything. I mean, it would not surprise me to find them even killing their own. But I think I told you about that one case where there was that the females had learned very quickly that you go off to have your infants, birth your infants, rather than staying within the proximity of the troop, because this young female, inexperienced female, and I don't know her history. They just this was a recorded observation where this female was literally having this baby, and they reach around and pull the infant underneath between their legs, and the infants just, I mean, this is common with all monkeys and apes. They just automatically are reaching out there, grasping, and as soon as that mother puts them to their chest, they grasp the fur. And I mean, it's like pulling, these things are like super glued to their moms at that point. And this male chimpanzee literally ran by, jerked that baby. I mean, the afterbirth and the placenta had not even come out of this mother yet. And the umbilical cord, he just ripped this baby right away from the mom before she'd even completely, she just completely delivered the baby, and then proceeded to go and kill the baby and eat it right there in front of the mother, this poor distressed mother. So you can imagine. yeah, they will put themselves in between a male, and the males are not nice to the infants. And like I say, even if they're their own, I've seen macaques. They just they will brutalize these babies, and they say that only like 35% of the infants ever make it to adulthood, and most of it is not due to injuries, natural injuries. It's due to injuries inflicted on them by these big males, whether it be alphas or beta males. You know.
Because I remember me and you talking about that a little while back, whether or not the females will leave when they give birth.
Yeah, actually, I'll talk about it to you guys privately, something I don't want to put out just yet, that Mr. Black told me the exact places where they give birth and why they do it there. That's sort of I guess a future teaser.
Well, I'm thinking a lot of it might be, especially with an animal that big, you know, horses do it. They'll go off away from the group, and I think it's probably to get, you know, if you're going to leave a smell of blood and such, because there is a small amount of blood involved, that you don't want a predator. You don't want to be leading a predator back to your band, you know,
right?
Or your troop.
And that's largely what he said was it has to do with predators in the area, wolves, things like that.
Yeah, and I think I've also told y'all too. This might be I think I've told you about this before with horses. You know, I've in breeding horses, we've lost foals before, and I was actually told this by my vet, and I had not known this before. We always, you know, went in there and removed the baby, and then I would always watch the mother fret and fret and fret, running up and down her stall and everything else, you know, fretting for her baby. They grieve. And Dan told me, he said, no, leave that baby in there for at least 24 hours. And he says, and then you tell me what you see that mare do. And they bury their babies. They cover them up. They would take and cover them up with the sawdust in the stalls. And at that point in time, that mare realizes my baby's gone. It's not coming back. It's gone. It's gone to me. And so I think that, and I've told you about monkey mothers that they carry their babies around with them for a long time, and a lot of times, so those babies are just literally desiccated in their arms, you know, grieving over the loss of. And you know, we make fun of women that do things like that. You know, we say, "Oh, that's craziness." You know, you have to stop and think, is that really craziness, or is that just that particular individual's way of grieving, you know, the loss of a child, you know. But these mother monkeys and apes will carry their babies literally around with them, or even throw that desiccated body over their back like they're hoping that that baby at some point in time is going to grasp them and they're going to go on. And it's really a sad situation to have to observe. And, you know, because you suddenly realize that these animals, they feel love, and there's a compassion there for their infants. And, you know, I don't care what they are, whether they be a horse or a monkey or an ape or a human. We just don't think of them having love in their hearts for their babies like we think a human does. But I think that every animal has a certain amount of compassion within them.
Yeah, I think, well, at the very least, most animals are pretty much hardwired for that, too. I mean, you know, the mothers and their infants.
Well, yeah. I mean, are we hardwired for it? I mean, is that that all there is to it? Well, come on. You know, let's face it.
Well,
I think having watched monkeys, I think there's actually more to it than just being hardwired. Yes, it's kind of like the baby being hardwired to them. I mean, you see them when they're being born, and I invite you to go out there and watch it. You can see them when they're born. Their little hands and their feet are just splayed, and you can see them reaching out and feathering the air, just waiting to feel the fur or the hair of that mama. And as soon as they do, boy, they grasp on, and I mean, they are locked in. And yes, there is some hard wiring to that. And but I think there's also some, as far as the mama goes, I think all those hormones and stuff are there for a reason for that animal to feel love and compassion towards their infant.
You know, it's interesting. I was just thinking, you know, the level of conversations we have about stuff, and thinking back to the old timers, you know, many years ago, and their conversations, it was night and day. They wouldn't even listen to a lot of things like we talk about. It just wasn't in their wheelhouse.
Well, you know, I think that humans, unfortunately, think that we're so above the nature of animals that we don't, that we would never respond, you know, like an animal would, or an animal would not respond like we would. I think that's, I just think that's a false premise to work on.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to try to figure something out that's unknown, you have to kind of, you know, think what other animals are like those comparisons. You know, I mean, if you have something you don't know anything about, well, what's its closest relative? What do they do? You know, what are the reported behaviors? Are they similar to what the unknown one is?
Well, I think for the educated human that lives in a ivory tower in some college, I think it shocks them to think that it's only humans that are loving, or, you know, has that thing where it's actually very animal, more so than human. Did that stop everything? Hello.
No, I think you made a good point, Mike.
That's totally true. I've worked with some armchair archaeologists and some armchair anthropologists. So,
well, and that describes the majority of Bigfoot people too, I think.
Well, I
yeah,
think,
armchair researchers.
You know, even, I mean, in the military, I mean, the most protective part when we're there is watching each other's back. And that is where it comes from. That's our innermost instinct right there in the middle of something we've been doing since we've been a race, or whatever they call it, you know? I mean, you got war, and then we watch the brothers back, that kind of thing. We're comrades in arms and stuff like that. And you care. We cry when we see our fallen comrade. And I really, God, when I was in Baghdad, it was that kind of stuff that is emotional. And I think it blows us away to think that we're the only ones that do it, and it shocks us to find out that, well, animals do it. I mean, you guys just said it. When a mother would try to hope and whatever they do, thinking that it's going to rejuvenate or whatever, you know, resuscitate, or hopefully just grab on and there's a glimpse of life, but there isn't. So I think it's more of a shock for us as educated, or being the apex priority. Yeah, I'm getting lost. But in a nutshell, I think it's just where we as humans, we don't think it's a shame to have it think that it's an animalistic trait instead of a human trait. Because,
well,
yeah,
I think too oftentimes people get, you know, wound up, and it's not just educated people, but just a lot of people, and I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, that people in general just seem to think that we are so much above nature that we can not only we aren't going to imitate it, neither are we going to, neither are we going to control it, and all this sort of, you know, of course, I think man is all about controlling nature, and you know, nature is so far beyond our control that it's not, that's just never going to happen. So, but I think that, you know, go ahead, Milo.
Oh, no, you're totally right. And it was like when we were talking about whenever we as the technology wide, needy human race we are, we go out there thinking we can own it, and we're shocked that we can't. So,
well, I think that's why a lot of people meet their untimely demise with Bigfoot and bear and even cougars, wolves, because we think we're so much smarter than them because we happen to be carrying a weapon. And there's plenty of people that have been killed and horribly mutilated by bears that will tell you that a lot of times those weapons are useless, absolutely useless.
Well, we just went on a trip and we were coming back through Yellowstone, and when we went through Yellowstone and saw all the bison, and you had people out there trying to take selfies with this stuff. You're gonna die. And my poor wife, she was out there trying to save people. I said, don't save them. Watch them. So hey,
to some extent, I think humans we're what's the word I'm looking for?
Stupid.
We're pretty arrogant.
Yeah.
Pretty arrogant.
Yeah, well, arrogant is a very good word. Very good.
I like it. Yep.
Well, I don't know if y'all saw there was a story out there, and it was actually on one of these YouTube deals about Yellowstone, and when Mila was talking about going to Yellowstone, that's when it suddenly reminded me of this, that when we're trying to control nature and interfere with nature, and they had some bison that were going across a creek, and one of the babies started getting swept down the creek a little bit, but did manage to get itself out, and was standing there shaking from the cold water and everything else. And little did they know that the mother was up a ways away looking for that baby. Well, these people, they took and picked this little calf up and put it in their car and then dried it off and took it to a ranger station. Now, even though they thought they were helping the baby, the rangers ended up having to euthanize the poor little calf for the simple reason that these stupid people had picked the baby up, dried it off, which got their human scent all over this baby. In the meantime, the mother would have found that calf. She was looking for the calf. And there were comments made by other people that I guess saw this happening, and I guess advised them not to do what they were doing, but they thought they were doing, something to help this little calf. Well, all it did was result in the death of this calf because they got their scent all over. The mother wouldn't have taken it. That calf wouldn't have gotten. That mother wouldn't have taken that calf back now that they had their scent all over it. So, they did everything that was, emphatically wrong, and ended the life of that poor calf, which it would have been fine. Yeah, it was cold and it was wet, but, they get cold and wet in the snow and everything else, and they survive. They're designed that way. So, anyway. Yeah. I watched that and I just got so mad. I thought, why, oh my gosh, why couldn't they just left it alone?
Well, everybody, I hate to say it, but we're just about out of time for this piece.
Can I say my joke?
Wait till we're done. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up, guys? No thoughts. Okay.
No, not really.
All right. Well, thanks for sitting around the fire with us, everybody, and join us next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.